Farming is a family affair for Steve Ridsdale. He lives on this 260-acre farm in East Yorkshire with his wife and son. It's owned by his 81-year-old father, Terry. When he passes the farm on, the changes to agricultural relief means that Steve will face an inheritance tax bill of up to £600,000.
We've got 10 years to pay that tax, but if the farm doesn't make enough margin to pay the tax, so we would have to sell. I'm not sleeping. I feel like I've worked all my life and everything I've ever earned is going to have to go on tax because of my dad's age and because we're unlikely to be able to get life insurance for him. And if we can get life insurance, the premium will be horrendous.
The farm's been in the family for generations, but now owner Terry Ridsdale fears for its future.
We came here in 1960 and it's been our lifetime looking after stock, our own cattle and now these bed and breakfast ones. And working the land. It could all go now with this new budget. It's a nice life, really, that's working outside all the time. But will the younger generation want to continue? My grandchildren? Doubtful.
Along with working on the farm, Steve's the chair of the British Farming Union. He says farmers will take action if the government doesn't rethink changes to inheritance tax.
Some of them are saying, well, we're going to have to push back at this and we're not going to cooperate. And they're starting to say, well, are we going to take the sewage sludge? Something like 85% of all the sewage solids go back to farmland. So farmers are saying, well, if you're not going to help us.
Brighton is cracking under pressure, and even the King seems fed up. After Nigel Farage's Reform UK delivered a shockwave in the 2025 local elections, Prime Minister Keir Starmer responded not with reflection, but with a sweeping war on dissent. The message? Challenge the system, and the system bites back. But the crackdown has backfired spectacularly. Instead of tightening control, it's unleashed a national firestorm. Arrests swept across the country, farmers dragged off their land, protesters silenced mid-chant, everyday citizens detained for little more than criticising Labour policy online. It sounds like something out of dystopian fiction. But this is Britain in 2025. A democracy that now jails its people for losing faith in their leaders. And behind palace walls, fury erupted. Sources close to Buckingham Palace say King Charles lost all composure when he was briefed on how peaceful farmers and voters were forcibly removed from protest sites. The monarch reportedly exploded in rage. Not just at the brutality, but at what Britain is becoming.
Where the Queen was head of state, in the Commonwealth and across the world, a deep sense of gratitude for the more than 70 years in which my mother, as Queen, served the people of so many nations. In 1947, on her 21st birthday, she pledged in a broadcast from Cape Town to the Commonwealth to devote her life, whether it be short or long, to the service of her peoples. That was more than a promise. It was a profound personal commitment which defined her whole life. She made sacrifices for duty. Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered through times of change.
Some weren't even on the streets. Just speaking up at local meetings was enough to get them hauled away. The spark? A deeply unpopular move by Starmer's government. A sweeping new inheritance tax on agricultural land. For many family-run farms, passed down for generations, it was a death sentence. Suddenly, cherished family estates were being sold off just to cover tax bills. Entire rural communities felt betrayed, and they didn't stay silent. What followed was a rural uprising unlike anything modern Britain has seen. Across Kent, Lincolnshire and Tyneside, the countryside roared back. Tractor convoys jammed highways. Livestock markets shut down. Fields transformed into protest camps. Thousands of furious voices rose up in unison, demanding to be heard and refusing to be ignored. But instead of opening a dialogue, the government chose force. Police were deployed en masse, not to protect, but to silence. What began as peaceful protests spiralled into something darker. Over 300 arrests were made, many without formal charges. Most remain in custody, their only crime speaking out. Social media exploded with haunting footage. Crying mothers, elderly farmers in handcuffs, teenagers shoved into police vans. These weren't rioters, they were citizens. And the images struck a nerve far beyond the farming towns. Anger spread fast. In cities and suburbs, voters who dared to question Labour MPs about brutal tax hikes, slashed benefits and unaffordable energy bills found themselves ejected from town halls and, in some cases, detained under sweeping new public security laws. What's began in the fields has become a national reckoning.
Obviously, to look at a new development, a very exciting development just outside Milton Keynes, which is going to be homes for very many people. And yes, there was a protest there, and to some extent that draws out quite an important discussion that we have to have as a country, because we passed a budget in the autumn of last year that had to do two things. The first was to stabilise and balance the books, the economy, and the second was to invest in things like our NHS and in housing. And we're seeing some early figures that are welcome. Obviously, the interest rates were cut for the third time since we've been in government last week. We've had growth figures today coming out showing growth in the economy, small but important steps. And of course, that means that mortgages will go down, and also NHS figures that show.
So now the question hangs heavy in the air. What kind of government arrests its own people simply for speaking their minds? The answer is simple. One that's out of ideas, out of patience, and dangerously close to losing control. But behind the palace gates, something is shifting. If insider reports are to be believed, King Charles is done biting his tongue. After months of watching the nation unravel, the monarch may finally be preparing to speak, not just as a figurehead, but as a force Britain hasn't seen in generations. Known for his calm and diplomatic manner, he was reportedly enraged after viewing footage of a disabled veteran being removed by police during a protest in Yorkshire. In a private meeting with senior advisers, His Majesty is said to have slammed his hand on the table and declared that this was not the country his mother left behind, that it had become authoritarianism dressed up as progress. Not long after, King Charles reportedly placed a private call to Prime Minister Starmer and delivered a chilling warning. The government was testing the patience of the nation and of the Crown itself. When the monarch breaks his silence, the crisis is no longer political, it's existential. Yet Starmer didn't flinch. Instead, he doubled down. Protest laws were tightened, digital surveillance ramped up, and vague threats about new restrictions on political speech began to surface. There's growing fear that these new powers won't stop with protesters. They'll be used to cripple Reform UK, the political wildfire threatening the status quo. But Starmer seems stuck in an old playbook. This isn't the 1980s anymore. The British public is no longer quietly obedient. Nigel Farage and the explosive rise of Reform UK have shattered the illusion. Millions now see the truth. A two-party system that's become smug, out of touch, and dangerously hostile to anyone who dares to push back. And they're done staying silent. Reform UK's sweep across 10 local councils, including once loyal Labour heartlands, was no fluke. Their victory in Runcorn and Helsby, where voters turned their backs on both Labour and the Conservatives, sent a clear message. The country is ready for a new direction. Labour's reaction revealed more than just panic. It exposed a transformation. The party that once stood for the working class is now presiding over their arrests. In trying to crush dissent, it's only confirmed what many feared. Labour no longer serves the people, it polices them. The same government that once promised to shield the vulnerable now slashes benefits with surgical coldness, all while squeezing modest homeowners with punishing tax hikes. Its energy policy? A chaotic mess, driven more by political theatre than real solutions. By choking domestic oil and gas production, it sent energy bills soaring and left thousands bracing for a winter of cold homes and empty wallets. When ordinary citizens protest, they're smeared as agitators. When farmers speak out, they're painted as tax cheats. And anyone who questions government policy, instantly branded as far right. But the public isn't buying it anymore. The mask has slipped, and people see the truth. Keir Starmer may think he's still in control, but in trying to silence opposition, he's exposed his biggest weakness. The tighter his grip becomes, the louder the backlash grows. And now, that backlash is everywhere. Nigel Farage didn't wait. Seizing the moment, he stood outside Parliament and delivered a blistering address to the nation. The arrests of peaceful farmers and voters, he said, weren't just wrong. They were a stain on British democracy. With Reform UK behind him, Farage vowed to restore the people's voice and tear down the bloated machine Labour now uses to crush dissent. And the message is catching fire. It's racing across rural villages and industrial towns, echoed in pubs, markets and factory floors. This isn't about left or right anymore. It's about a population rising up against a system that stopped representing them long ago. Whispers inside Buckingham Palace suggest King Charles is quietly weighing constitutional options, a last resort if the unrest spirals further out of control. His powers may be limited, but one public rebuke from the Crown would be historic, and it could shatter what's left of Starmer's authority. Because here's the truth, you can't govern a nation by criminalising its citizens. You can't arrest farmers, silence pensioners and crush opposition, then expect the public or the press to play along. And you certainly can't suffocate dissent and still demand loyalty. Not in Britain, not anymore. Keir Starmer mistook Labour's victory for a blank cheque. But it wasn't a mandate, it was a magnifying glass. Now the entire nation is watching, and the cracks in his leadership are growing wider by the hour. The uprising is no longer brewing, it's here. The silence has broken, and even the king has drawn a line in the sand. The real question isn't if Starmer will cross it, it's when. And when he does, what kind of Britain will be waiting on the other side? Meanwhile, Reform UK isn't pulling punches. In her fiery victory speech, Andrea Jenkins unleashed a scathing attack, accusing her rivals of orchestrating a campaign built on smears, dirty tricks and character assassinations. The gloves are off. The battle lines are clear. Jenkins didn't stop at general accusations. She alleged that Conservative insiders had pressured police to sabotage her campaign, while rivals stooped to smearing her personal life, including whispers of an inappropriate relationship with a political colleague. But she saved her sharpest words for one rival who mocked her for not being local. With biting precision, Jenkins fired back, pointing out the irony of being questioned by someone with a South African accent. Once seen as a rising star within the Conservative right, Jenkins made one thing clear. She's no longer following their script. She's carving out her own path, and it's heading straight into the heart of Britain's political reckoning. The newly elected MP wasted no time drawing battle lines. Jenkins tore into the government's immigration policy, blasting the use of taxpayer money to house migrants in hotels. She pushed for a tougher, more cost-of-even model, temporary camps modelled after France's system, calling it a sustainable alternative that puts citizens first. Now, holding the reins of a £24 million sterling, 0 pence regional budget, Jenkins will oversee critical portfolios like transport planning, vocational training and economic development across a region of 4 million people. And if her victory speech was any indication, she plans to lead with fire. Witnesses say the speech was so blistering, her opponents walked off the stage in protest, leaving Jenkins standing alone at the mic, delivering her final words to a room frozen in disbelief.
That's where they should.
And, well, illegal migrants, people come here illegally, they should be put in tents like they do in France.
People seeking asylum should also be put in tents?
Well, I think genuine asylum seekers, like Ukraine, etc., that's a different matter.
And then you also accused one candidate of, she said you were parachuted in,
yes,
and you made a comment about her South African accent. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant is, how can they say I've been parachuted in when I spent most of my life in Lincolnshire, school,
Why mention the accent, sorry?
Because the irony of saying someone's been parachuted in who's not even from the country. I mean, I went to school, college, university, so I think...
So someone who's got an accent can't be from this county?
I think, actually, I'm not even going to answer any more of your questions. I think that your questioning is quite divisive. You're looking into things when it was a little play with words, it was a little joke because of the irony. Do you not understand irony?
The only reason I'm asking is because Reform get a reputation for these divisive politics.
Questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. A sensible question. Thank you. My first...
Andrea Jenkins wasn't just celebrating a local victory, she was unveiling a manifesto for Reform UK's national ambitions. Framing Lincolnshire as the launchpad for a full-scale political revolution, she declared the results a historic breakthrough. With fierce conviction, she promised to dismantle the bloated, sluggish machinery of government and build something leaner, smarter and truly accountable. This wasn't just a win, it was a warning shot. Reform UK isn't aiming for influence, it's aiming for power.
I think the people, the working man and woman and businesses want national government to listen to them and listen to them properly to help drive this great country forward.
That's interesting. You quite clearly, Ross, just, take your time, take a sip of water. Just listening carefully to you, you quite clearly are worried that Keir Starmer is not listening to the concerns of most voters in this country. I know you suggested that on several occasions. What would you say directly to him?
What I'm saying to Keir is this. He needs to listen and take action, but also remember they've been in government a short length of time. We've got to drive places like Doncaster forward. Keir's got to drive the country forward and actually deliver economic growth so all can prosper.
And is he doing?
But Andrea Jenkins isn't the only one forcing Keir Starmer to face reality. In Doncaster, incumbent Mayor Ros Jones held onto her seat, but just barely, scraping by with fewer than 700 votes. And, instead of a victory lap, Jones used the moment to send a stark warning to Labour's national leadership. You're completely out of touch. There was no sugarcoating it. Jones didn't mince words, didn't spin the numbers. Her message was blunt, and it echoed what millions are already thinking. The party that once spoke for the people no longer hears them. Jones didn't hold back. She tore into Labour's proposed changes to winter heating allowances, slammed the hike in employers' national insurance contributions, and condemned brutal welfare cuts, warning that these policies aren't just numbers on paper, they're suffocating real people. She reminded the crowd that she'd already redirected local support funds to keep her constituents from freezing this winter, a move she says the National Party should have led on. And she wasn't done. Jones called out how rising national insurance costs are crushing small businesses, while new restrictions on community support services are driving struggling families to the brink. Her message to Labour's leadership was crystal clear. If you don't start listening to the people you claim to represent, the backlash will only grow louder. This wasn't a celebration, it was a siren. A warning shot aimed straight at the heart of a party that's drifting dangerously far from its roots. It's also undeniable proof that Britain's political centre of gravity is shifting, and fast. The recent election results, combined with King Charles's reported behind-the-scenes actions, mark more than a political shake-up. They're a historic warning. Britain's democratic foundations are under real strain. You can't govern a free nation by handcuffing its citizens and calling it progress. Sooner or later, every government that forgets that simple truth meets the same end. The clock is ticking, and this time, the people aren't staying quiet. If this political firestorm grips your attention, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We've got more hard-hitting political breakdowns coming your way. Stay tuned.